So we're talking about attribution again.
Yes, indeed. Does that give me the opportunity to use my more for support than illumination joke again?
No, it doesn't, Simon. Hello and welcome to episode 11 of What's MOPs Got to Do With It, the marketing operations podcast that's trying to get to the bottom of what marketing operations looks like in the corporate landscape. I'm Karla Wentworth.
And I'm Simon Daniels.
And since our last episode where we had the wonderful second half of the Daniels family with us, what on earth has Toby done, Simon?
Yes, he has ruptured his Achilles tendon playing tennis, which makes him sound very active and virile, but it turns out maybe not so much. So best wishes to him for a speedy recovery to get out of the boot that befalls everybody who has that particular injury, and for the onward recovery and physiotherapy and everything else.
Absolutely. So, and it was nothing to do with us.
I don't think so.
Good.
No, as intense and strenuous as the podcast is, I don't even think that would.
Or he was running to get as soon as the episode dropped, running to listen to it. Oh, you said tennis, didn't you?
You
said
running
tennis.
To listen to it. Yeah,
running away.
So yeah, well, thanks for mentioning it, and I'll say
best wishes.
Right, well, let's have a quick chat about or a quick rundown on who we're speaking to. So in this episode, our marketing leader guest is Steffen Hedebrandt, Chief Marketing Officer and co-founder at marketing attribution solution provider Dreamdata.
Marketing operations leader is Helene Horniker, who's head of marketing operations at Sync.
And of course, we chat with our friend, independent stateside marketing operations consultant and principal at Must 10 Martech, Courtney Macara, as we grab a virtual coffee with Courtney. And talking of LinkedIn, where you saw Toby's little accident. His boot. Another many-time LinkedIn or frequent LinkedIn poster, our friend and previous guest, Daryl Alfonso, has actually been writing on Martech, the marketing technology website. And I wrote a little response to something that he'd put together. And one point that he made within that I thought might be worth having a quick conversation about was the perception of marketing operations and the importance of making sure that we make sure that the rest of marketing and the business in general really understands what marketing operations is all about. So often we get a bit relegated or pushed into the corner, sometimes even referred to as the IT of marketing, which always rubs me up the wrong way a little bit. What do you think, Karla? How
do you know what? When I think about marketing operations over the last, dare I say it, 25 years, I'll take IT of marketing because we were always known as admin of marketing or the factory of marketing. So IT feels like quite an upgrade, but a big upgrade. But I fully agree. It's almost a pigeonhole, a box to put us in that it's so much more than IT. Even if you do consider Martech to be the thing, it's so much more than that.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's exactly it, isn't it? It risks, again, falling into the marketing operations is Martech. And of course, as I'm sure we've discussed, it is so much more than that. So nothing against IT, as always, but I just wouldn't want MOPs to be put into that limited container.
No, definitely. And I was only having a conversation with somebody today, actually, about best practice marketing organizations and what they look like. And somebody pulled out this model that had, I can't even tell you, maybe 20, 30 boxes on it that were all specific specialisms or roles or teams, if you'd like, within a marketing department. And I almost feel like we could do exactly the same with marketing operations right now. Maybe not 20 or 30, but I reckon that we could put a good few boxes on this is what we do, and IT/Martech being just one of them. In fact, you could probably put some boxes inside that as well.
Certainly, in terms of the definition, you could cover a number of different areas. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think we're just going to grow in marketing and marketing operations, and we're going to see some of the marketing teams morphing into the operations teams. and maybe morphing the other way back as well. So I think Daryl's absolutely right in what he's saying. Times are changing. What we need to be do is front and center. We need to be sure that people understand what we're here for.
Absolutely agreed. Well, with that, let's move on and get to our first guest.
Right, let's get to our marketing leader guest. And who's joining us today, Simon?
Well, I feel like we're getting two for the price of one today, Karla, as we're speaking to not only a CMO, but also the co-founder of a revenue attribution solution. So I know we're in for a very interesting conversation. A self-certified growth hacker with a successful track record scaling businesses, including Upwork and Airtime. Please welcome to What's MOPs Got to Do With It, Steffen Hedebrandt, Chief Marketing Officer and co-founder at B2B revenue attribution platform Dreamdata. Steffen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Simon and Karla. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's great to have the chance to talk on the subject of attribution, the hot topic.
What is it? How do we do it? How do we do it, Steffen? How do we get perfect attribution? Question number one, only question.
We've only got a few minutes.
Yeah. No, don't answer that.
Let's start with tell us a little bit more about Dreamdata and the solution that you have there, and you can answer Karla's question in terms of how do we do attribution.
Yeah, I think I can run through quickly the founder story, which I think most of you, both you and your listeners, can relate to.
Sure.
It's kind of two-folded. So I come from a background as a B2B marketing leader, and I've been part of going from spending €0 on ads per month to spending hundreds of thousands of euros on ads per month. And as you put in the first €10,000, you feel like fairly certain about, now something is happening here and here. But as you put in the last €10,000, you're less secure and not really sure that it's hitting. Yeah, exactly. So what Dreamdata is today is basically a B2B go-to-market data platform, which means we try to, any digital touch you have about your customer journeys, we try to put into one data warehouse. We try to clean it up and join it together so it gets unsiloed and you get like one time out of every touch of every account. And when you have that timeline cleaned up, so it's an account-based data model, so it's not individuals, it's really accounts. And what you can use that for is really, is there any ads that consistently are present that move towards becoming sales qualified leads or deals you win, or is there certain stuff that move deals from one stage to another, etc. This is not giving you 100% of the truth, just to already get started there. But you're looking for something that is statistically, somewhat valid, that can confirm your gut feeling and what you're already seeing, and it gives you the confidence to do more of it or do less of it, because sometimes, ads are just a waste of money as well.
Right.
Do you know what you're saying that, Steffen? I remember vividly. Some time ago, it feels like it was yesterday, but it's probably more like 10 years. I've just aged myself there. But having conversations about attribution, and I remember the words coming out of my mouth, you should be able to account for every penny of marketing spend and the return that it brings you. And now I don't think I would ever say that, because it's so complex and so digital and so influenced. But what do you think? Should marketers even bother to strive for knowing what their marketing spend influences on attribution, or is it more complex than that?
So I normally talk about like a three-step approach to it. First of all, I believe really marketers should be able to come up with a narrative of why are you doing these things and how does this connect to revenue. Then secondly, they need to test that narrative up against their colleagues and their networks, get those critical questions. I'm seeing these ads, we're doing these things, and it looks to be working. And then at the end of it, you also need to provide the proof in the form of data that it's true that what you're saying. Now, we're not trying to produce science here. We're just trying to get data that we can act upon in a business. So that means that if something needed to be scientifically correct, you might need 10,000 clicks. But if you can see after the first 200 or 300 clicks that this ad has not produced a single email sign up on our website, or it has actually produced 2 demo calls, then it's enough for you to act upon it. Mm-hmm. So, but I really think that just the sheer exercise of actually coming up with a narrative of why are we doing these things? Does it logically make sense? And test it against your CFO, test it against your salespeople, test it against the fellow marketers. And if you then want to spend a lot of money on it, then you actually need to come with the data that explains, I have proof it's working. We should be able to put more money into it and so forth.
So the more money you want to spend, the more explanation and evidence that you're going to need to do something. Do you know, and I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because too often I think we make this difficult with attribution, is that we're trying to prove so many things that it stops us from actually doing anything.
It is the marketer's responsibility. You're going out and you're spending a whole lot of money, so you better have that story ready for, we don't have unlimited funds and we can only spend our money once. So is it better that we get another salesperson or another engineer, or is it really your marketing campaign that this company should be putting our money into?
And I like the piece about, I don't know whether it's not exactly diminishing returns, but the notion that, the first X, you can be confident you're going to get something out of it, but the second X, is that delivering a marginal gain, and what's working and so on. And I think that's where it gets really important, because
I think diminishing returns is super true, Simon.
Okay.
Because that goes across all marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can select the perfectly fit customers for your product, which is maybe, 500 companies in the world.
Right.
Then you run ads towards those, and the ads work.
Yeah.
But at some point, they've seen those ads 10 times or 20 or 30 times. Then suddenly the return goes down. Then you need to reach further out to companies who are not like exactly your core customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And suddenly those ads doesn't work as well as the other ones did. And that goes across all sorts of marketing. There's a limit to how many searches a specific keyword on Google every month.
Yeah.
So when you have exhausted that keyword, you need to go to another keyword, which is a little bit further away from your core, and then it gets more expensive.
Right. And so that probably segues into the next question I wanted to ask, which is, when should marketers consider a solution like yours? Is it that point when you're moving out of the low-hanging fruit, and you really need to start being able to more finely target, or just better understand the return that you're getting from that incremental spend?
A good question. So, I've thought a lot about it. I've personally been using our product since we were just the 3 founders.
Right.
But I think in the beginning, the better advice is just to get a lot of stuff done, try a ton of stuff out.
Right.
That's more important than sitting and analyzing really small numbers.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is, first of all, in terms of data, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you don't start like getting the data set up correct and start storing the data, then you're going to be in an annoying situation 1 or 2 years from now. So getting the kind of infrastructure in place, I would do early, but then the deeper analysis, you can maybe wait a bit with. But if you think about it, even a demo call itself, from our own account, it takes 5 visits. And then in the attribution sense, the first visit can be a click on an ad. The next one can be somebody who Googles your brand name organically, and then you have 1, 2, 3 direct visits. And in that original source field in the CRM system is going to tell you this was a direct visit.
Right.
No, the truth is actually that it was somebody you paid to come to your website. And it was actually a good deal because you paid X amount, and the demo call is worth £1,000 for you, or £100 or something like that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, I did a project recently where we actually ended up capturing every single touch point and the UTM parameters associated with that, to make it possible to go back and do that kind of granular analysis. And I'm not saying we had the best plan for what we're going to do with that data, but it just seemed like the right thing to do, versus just having the most recent touch, which obviously completely limits you to what you can actually do from an analysis perspective.
And you mentioned data, Steffen, and data is clearly what we're talking about now, but How perfect do you think that data needs to be for you to get true attribution?
Really not that good. I think a lot of people like they wait around for the day that never comes, which is the day where the data is just completely cleaned and perfect.
Right.
I think what like, when people start using our product, it helps highlight that, for example, or you actually have a lot of duplications in your serum that you should clean up, or you should more be like, we actually want to be really correctly data driven in our B2B. So we're starting this project. If we then find stuff that is like clearly a mess, then we'll need to clean that up along the way, because we've committed to doing a truly data-driven path.
The reason I asked that, it was almost a loaded question, actually. I have a bit of a bugbear that people are trying to get to the world of perfection before they do something. And there's now so much data. We've got so much data to collect and so many places to look that it's almost paralyzing us from making decisions or doing something. And I just wanted to qualify, sometimes I think it's better to do something rather than wait for it to be perfect.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And depends a little bit on also which, kind of business you are. If you're trying to grow fast, speed is 100% more important. If you're doing, if you're doing infrastructure to like the healthcare industry or something like that, then you probably want to make sure that the machines really work.
There's that caveat there. There's that like, don't sue us.
But I would say 9 out of 10 times it's better to move fast and try stuff and see how it works rather than, also, like in the time perspective, getting from 0 to 80% often takes a little bit of time, and then the last 80 to 100 takes too long for the value to be worth it.
But even poor attribution or incorrect data tells you a story and gives you information. And I think that's another thing that I feel quite passionately about, that even failure in this context tells you something and is valuable, that tells you where your next step is, or your next best action.
And so what's the role of marketing operations here? Is MOPs the natural home for managing attribution? And obviously we're talking about data and process and MarTech. So that seems like where it should sit. Is that your experience when you're selling into your clients?
Yeah, I almost feel like turning this question around to you guys, but I can just anecdotally say that typically when we're selling our product, there's kind of a triangle of stakeholders involved, which is one is the people who do the day-to-day activity in marketing, paid ads, content, etc. They have like a marketing leader who's kind of the economic buyer, and then there's the ops people, sometimes supplemented by data engineers, style, validating that we're not just bullshitting or something like that, they actually validate this solution works with our solution, it lives up to the technical and security kind of criteria, etc. But it's kind of at least how I see it is typically maybe that's also what makes our sale a little bit complex sometimes. It's the marketers who have the problem, but it's the ops people who actually know how to set these things up and connect all the dots in all the systems that you guys are using every day.
Right.
But it also depends which kind of, I don't know if I'm speaking out of which kind of marketing ops person you are, whether some are given a lot of responsibility where they have to kind of proactively drive the business forward, and others are more like order takers that kind of gets a request from the organization, and then either they give a reply or they fix some stuff, etc.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about that and touch on that from time to time, and certainly, from my perspective, I always say that while MOPs is there to deliver a service, it's definitely not just there to be told how high to jump. And with something like this, MOPs should be proactive and be going to marketing leadership and demand gen or field marketing, what have you, and saying, we need to improve our attribution. This is the solution that we think we should be putting in place. Would you have any advice for MOPs? What sorts of things perhaps do you wish that you got asked, or what kind of information are you looking for when you're doing a deployment? Is there any kind of advice you can offer there?
So there's the general advice is that to look at your organization and to see whether their actions are leaving digital traces.
Right.
Because if it's not like leaving digital trails, that could be in the form that you don't just ship emails from your private Gmail, you use an automation platform.
Yeah.
When you send emails, you use UTMs. When customer success takes requests coming in, they use a platform as well. You force salespeople to use a calling software, either from inside of HubSpot or AirCall or something like that, making sure that the behavior is not, just completely cowboy behavior. And then at least what we see, it works best for us when people go with proven vendors. And what I mean is in the sense of do go with HubSpot or Salesforce or Pipedrive, Microsoft Dynamics, the established players, rather than finding some fringe player that never integrates within any of the other platforms.
Right.
So for us to deliver our product, we're really depending on people using, fairly standardized tools.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that comes back to the data piece, doesn't it? In terms of being able to collect the right data and have those touch points and so on. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and talking about data collection and the beast that we have, so let's talk about cookies. The forthcoming browser privacy measures that are heading our way, and the MOPs people are actually busying themselves talking about, but I'm not sure they're busying themselves doing anything about it. Do you think this is going to make attribution harder?
It depends who you are in that sense. So I think those who are really in trouble are the ad platforms, because they sit on the outside pushing traffic in, trying to understand what's going on. A service like ours, we're a first party data processor. So we just work with the data that you collect. This also means that when we sit as a statistical cookie, we set it as your cookie, but also in the local storage. And what we can see is that it's not really getting deleted. Those Apple and the Co is trying to hit is kind of those who are doing not so pretty stalking of people.
Right.
So somebody like us, we sit actually on the website collecting behavior about users, where you can see where is it coming from, but also what is it becoming down the sales pipeline.
And it's going to be hard for some people and not hard for others.
Yeah, and probably not hard for those people that are kind of doing the right thing already. So that's the good message, I think.
Yeah, and I think we'll see, also running ads will be more based on instead of like, I still remember the good old days where you can do 180 days retargeting when people go on your website because the cookie was just sitting there.
Right.
But I think nowadays we'll see much more, you have to collect the email first, then you can run ads towards that email on different social media. Because we know the account, then we can run account-based ads on LinkedIn afterwards. So if the cookie stops working, it's the cat and mouse game, and we'll try to find other ways to keep targeting the people we're trying to get in front of. So
as a CMO yourself, what are your wider thoughts on the contribution of marketing operations within attribution and marketing more widely? How do you work with MOPs in your role?
Actually, in my former company before Dreamdata, we had a guy who were doing MOPs without us actually knowing that it was MOPs. He was the guy in the commercial team, knitting everything together from like a technical point of view, making sure data was synced across all the tools. If there were custom queries we needed made, he was doing this. I think this is like 6-7 years ago, and where I'm not sure MOPs necessarily had a name back then.
Right.
But he was like fundamentally crucial for us. We grew from like 10 to 100 employees, and he was just constantly making sure all the systems worked.
Yeah.
So
there's always somebody doing MOPs, or MOPs is always being done, whether you know it or
yes.
not. Yeah, whether you're MOPs or not, it's being done.
Exactly. But because I live in a very, I live in this little tech bubble where I take for granted that people care about ops, but
Right.
So it's hard for me to sit outside that world of, I think it's extremely important. And I think you need to be like pedantic about everything you do in terms of like, don't have duplicates in your CRM system. Make sure you can track everything that's going on. Make sure the data syncs, etc. So I think it's extremely important. And if you don't do MOPs well, you just end up doing a ton of bad decisions all the time.
I think that's a sound bite to live by.
I think it is. And at that point, we're pretty much out of time. Yeah. And I don't think you could have ended on a better statement, Steffen, that ops is required and needed.
We might just use that.
Feel free.
We'll make it a really short podcast. Yeah. No, seriously, we are out of time. But thank you for at least trying to make me understand how I can get 100% attribution.
Right.
Sorry, you'll never get
We'll
that.
Definitely. We'll put your contact details in the show notes. So if anybody does want to ask you the silver bullet question, they can. But thanks so much for your time, Steffen.
Thanks again, Steffen.
Thank you, Karla, and thank you, Simon.
Thanks again, Steffen. Great conversation. Really enjoyed that. I did like the comment that Steffen made right up front that marketing is basically about pipeline and revenue generation. I think putting aside even attribution, that's a rule that's worth living to and keeping in mind. I liked his startup story as well. It was a classic combination of somebody had an idea, and then there was some serendipity when somebody met somebody somewhere or was introduced, and they're like, "Oh, we should start a business. I've got an idea." Okay, so that's always fun. On the attribution point, I think the main takeaway there is that one of diminishing returns. The idea that as you do more marketing, that's when attribution becomes more important, because you really need to try and work out where does the extra pound, dollar, euro get spent, and what's the return on that. So that for me was the key point. Steffen would be delighted, I know, to be contacted on LinkedIn. He's also on Twitter. We'll put all those links rather, in the show notes. And with that, let's move on.
So today we're speaking to a well-rounded MOPs professional who, in my imagination, but also in my experience, I've spent a long time in Zurich and based in Zurich, speaking to us, I'm sure, with beautiful lakes and mountains in the distance, set your imagination wild, with a solid track record in operations, data, analytics, roles at Citrix, VM software, and now Sync, a self-professed tamer of chaos, a phrase I love very much. Please welcome to What's MOPs Got to Do With It, Helene Hornecker, Head of Marketing Operations, Developer Security Platform Sync. Thank you for joining us, Helene.
Thanks, Karla. Thanks, Simon. The name of the company is actually Sneak, which is a little tricky, pronounced Sneak or Snick, depending on who you're talking to in the organization.
And does it stand for anything? Is it a shortened?
The internal urban legend is that it stands for "so now you know," but that's really just urban legend. So it doesn't.
Yeah, that's the same as Slack is meant to stand for central location of all knowledge or something like that. But it's like,
that sounds made up.
Yeah, they had the name and then thought, well, we need to have this stand for something.
I think that's fantastic. And I think whether it's urban legend or not, that's what it is. It makes perfect sense.
I agree.
So thank you so much for joining us anyway, Helene. I will try harder to get the name, at least, of your business right. But now is your opportunity to tell us a little bit more about Sneak and about your role and how you got into marketing operations, because we were talking in a little preamble before. You've got quite an interesting background.
And I've joined the company a bit more than 2.5 years ago at this point to really scale marketing operations. But as you mentioned, I have a background in general revenue operations. So the last, it's been a while now, 10, 12 years or so.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Exactly. I started, I discovered sales ops a little bit by chance at Citrix. and moved around in the company, ended up doing channel operations, compensation management. And then I talked to our VP of sales operations, who was like, I have a role. I don't know yet what we're going to call it, but I'm pretty sure you can do something about it, which was more focused on data management. And that's how I led to lead import and eventually marketing operations. And then I joined Veeam, where I managed marketing operations at a global in a global capacity. And then for Sneak, the same thing happened. I joined the company, and the marketing team was probably 8 people at the time, which was a really small organization. The company was less than 200 people. And at this point in time, we're probably around 1,300, 1,400, something like that. So it grew very fast.
Wow. And how do you, I mean, on that journey and watching that all around you, that's got to impact you as an employee, let alone as a leadership position to keep hold of the strategy and the direction of the business. So how impactful is it to grow that quickly?
It's actually, it won't fit for everyone, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
People have to be very comfortable with change and always have line of sight of what the longer term objective is.
Mm-hmm.
As an individual, as an employee, I think what was quite striking to me is the culture of the company hasn't changed that much. When I joined the company, I found it very small. I came from much bigger organizations. Funnily enough, I worked with some colleagues who were like, oh, the company is so big already. We came from completely the opposite angle. And the nature, the level of collaboration really didn't change. We're using Slack, so it's very interactive, very fluid in terms of communication styles. People are extremely helpful and friendly. And to this day, when I meet with new hires, everyone's always very impressed by the culture. Now, looking more at balancing out, the strategy and the day-to-day work that needs to happen, it is definitely challenging, because particularly in an operations role, as you know, we have incoming requests, things break, things need to be done, things have to happen. But at the same time, we have to build systems, processes, infrastructures that are going to hold for at least a couple of quarters, ideally for the longer term and help the company scale. And it's really this balancing out that everyone is doing between, okay, what am I going to do today, and how is that going to help me reach my goals tomorrow? And prioritization is extremely important. And I think that's what I emphasize the most with my team is, beginning of the week, what are the 3 things you're going to do today? What are the meetings you shouldn't be attending? And going forward, what are the big projects we should be focusing on?
That is a very intense environment that you describe. I was interested, I mean, first of all, you have a almost very pure play ops background, or almost rivaling my own, which is quite good to see. Makes a bit of a change than falling into it, or moving from one thing into another. So that's quite nice. What I was going to comment on was your comment there about time spans and, a quarter or 2 quarters, building something to last that period of time. Is that really how long things last, or are you able to put things in place that stay around for a little bit longer than that?
So that's a very good point. In some of the infrastructure pieces, for instance, our marketing automation platform, we've implemented it, I think it's been a bit more than a year now. So we switched from HubSpot to Marketo, and we're still using Marketo down the road. Same thing for Salesforce. Those are bigger structural changes that no one should even want to change more often. But when we look at the processes and the way we work, we make constant adjustments to make sure that the processes scale with the business. And for some of the smaller experimentation work, the whole company has really an experimentation mindset, which is quite interesting, and something I really got to develop when I joined Sneak is, well, we're going to try that thing, and maybe it works or it doesn't work, and we'll see. And some of those have a shorter time time span. The idea being, of course, if you rip and replace everything every quarter, you're not going to get anywhere. So you have to make incremental progress. But for a lot of things, what we say internally, other urban legend is the company is a different company every quarter, and that's really reflective of that. We have to adjust. We have to adapt to the new environment, maybe external or internally, how the teams have grown organically.
You talked about that organic growth and the speed of growth, which is pretty amazing. Has that stabilized now? And also, how do you talked about your systems, how do you find a system that's appropriate for the size of business that you're becoming? You mentioned a couple of tools as well. So are you stable?
At this point, I feel we're reaching this level of maturity in the company aging, cycle, where it was a really young, volatile startup environment, and we're growing up as an organization. And I feel like the foundational pieces are in place now. So the big financial systems, the CRM, the map, all those are in place, and the adjustments are more on how we're using them. And the focus we put into is making sure everyone's trained properly, making sure we use the tools to the extent or at full capacity. And then tools that are a bit more marginal, that's where we're still seeing some fluctuation. But overall, the systems architecture is a lot more stable. And the same goes for the processes. So for instance, we have campaign operations processes where we use Marketo, and we have Marketo as a service, if you will, where we get inbound requests, and we have different levels of support based on the level of comfort and how familiar the campaign managers are with the tool. So they're like, I have an email to send out, I need help, or can you just QA? So we really adjust to the requirements the teams have. And this is where we've established a bit of an internal menu of those are your options. It's standardized, but you have a little bit of flexibility. And that will get us to the next level because we can accommodate for 95% of the cases.
And you mentioned that things are changing all the time. So your prioritization. So how do you prioritize with so many changes at such a rapid rate? How do you prioritize your own changes to get things done?
So we have a rolling planning effort. Of course, it's an annual planning where we make the big decisions for the next year, including the spend, what are the big tools we want to implement, potentially major changes or processes we want to revamp. And then we have this rolling review primarily on a quarterly basis, but every month we review that the list is still accurate. And more than a change, it's more a rolling adjustment. So those big priorities will happen. There's a reason why they were on the list of big rocks, but maybe we're going to shift the priority order between a couple of bigger projects just because of resourcing dependencies on other teams or something like that.
Helene, tell us a little bit more about your team. You mentioned advising them to always be thinking about what meetings they should be in, which is a great piece of advice. How is your team configured to address the challenges that you're facing?
We have three big areas in the team, or three groups in the team. One is really around reporting and analytics with subject matter experts for what we call the user funnel. So people who are using the product-led motion, really the demand funnel, and then everything that's digital and website. So that's all around the reporting cadence, getting the right numbers, the right KPIs, tracking the results. And we have a pretty well-oiled process at this point where we review the numbers with the business on a weekly basis, monthly basis, and we have obviously the quarterly packages as well. So all about the numbers. Then we have the platform operations group around the technology, centered around the map, but it also comprises the ancillary systems and everything related to data management and privacy considerations, which has become a very important topic, particularly in the last few quarters. And then the last team is campaign operations, which is more this MarTech as a service team where we manage the nurtures, emails, landing pages, lead imports, everything really around the campaign management aspects.
Roughly how many people is that, Helene?
About 10 people at this point.
Are they all centrally located?
We're very distributed. So the team is now centralized under a strategy and operations global organization. So marketing operations is not under marketing, it's under this central function. And we're part of the same organization as sales ops. It's a little bit the concept of revenue operations, but extended to include also IT, localization, enablement. So we really try and make the most of having everyone under the same umbrella to facilitate collaboration. And in terms of where people are physically located, we've got people in Europe, in Canada, in the US. So everything is extremely virtual, which also gives us some time zone coverage to be able to work with all the campaign managers.
So I want to come back to that point and the sort of geographical and time zone spread. Just before that, I really like, excuse me, the sound of the team. I love that shape. The campaign ops, how much delivery are you doing versus frontline go-to-market marketers? You talked a little bit about people can ask for help or they can choose from a menu of options. What's the balance there?
We have what we call the champion program, Marketo champion program. And so I say it's probably about half, where we have people who are really knowledgeable about Marketo. They don't have to be certified, but we want to make sure they know what they're doing.
Right.
So we originally give access to everyone at, read-only type of access. And then once they earn their little star and they become a champion, then we're like, okay, now you can be self-sufficient and we're just going to QA for you.
Yeah.
And then for some users who are newer or just are not, marketing technology is not their calling, let's put it this way, we're just going to make sure to support them all the way or a bit further down the process. And we have differentiated SLAs to make that happen. So when we just have to QA, obviously we can turn that around in 1 day or 2 days, depending how big the backlog is. For something that's brand new or require really robust support, we're going to look at a week in terms of SLA.
So you have end users in Marketo.
We do.
But presumably it sounds like nothing would go out until you've looked at it.
That's right. And we've also made sure to differentiate user permissions in Marketo to make sure, in spite of having extended access, nothing quote unquote can go wrong.
Right.
We can't export the whole database or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. We were talking in our last episode about that kind of balance, and it was a bit more away from end users, but I certainly can see the sense in what you're doing, especially with, relatively speaking, I'm sure you'd agree, Karla, a pretty small team to be getting all that done.
It never ceases to amaze me when we talk to people how much is being done with very few people, and I think that's testimony to marketing operations, full stop. But question from me on the sort of centralized nature of the business. I do a lot of work with businesses and centralization. It feels like it's getting very popular now that people, I don't know whether it's just a great strategy or it's the way of the world, talking about geographically located staff and now how we're working in a very virtual world. But how many locations are you servicing?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I don't have the answer to.
Well, you can make it up because nobody will be able to validate it.
That is true. I'm going to go with, probably, let's say 7-8 countries.
Okay.
And it spans from, we have people in APJ, on the East Coast, on the West Coast, in Europe. So we're really covering all the time zones effectively. But we have bigger offices or biggest locations, let's put it this way, around Ottawa, Boston, London, Tel Aviv, where originally the earliest offices were. And so the core of the teams are also located in those regions.
And talking of time zones, how does that work then? So you've talked about some very disparate, locations that will be in very different time zones. How do you service them? I'm assuming you're not 24/7 just yet.
It does feel like that sometimes.
Yeah.
But typically what happens is you have the golden hours between, let's say, 7 a.m. Eastern time and maybe noon Eastern time, where we have good overlap, at least between the US and Europe. For our APJ team, it's typically a little more challenging. They can catch up the US-based team on the other side of the time zone continuum. But in general, most of the in-person communication happens in that time span, and the rest is very much offline. The workflows are well established at this point, particularly when it comes to that campaign operations piece. So we have an Asana request process, could be Jira, the tool doesn't really matter, but we have an intake process, and we manage all the requests that are coming in through that single entry point, dispatch the requests through the teams, and then make sure that we service them within the agreed SLAs. So the team has gotten used to working really with the system and following the process, so that we make sure to work around really that time difference that could be challenging.
And you've kind of answered my next question, which was going to be that I guess it's absolutely key, based on where you are and based on that time span you have to cover, that you communicate really well with your team. You mentioned Asana, you mentioned Jira. Are you really heavily reliant on that kind of updating each other, having all the work in one single version of the truth, et cetera, et cetera?
100%. And in terms of alignment within the team, we have one of the things that we have introduced that is a little trick, but worked really well for us, especially during the pandemic, was we have a bot in Slack that just asks at the beginning of the week on Monday morning, what are your 3 priorities for the week? And it takes 30 seconds to fill that in, but then everyone knows what the team is working on, if there's potential overlap, or if they need to help someone out, or who's on vacation on Friday, or things like that. So it's a bit of a level set at the beginning of the week, and then we do a close up at the end of the week with the weekly reports. So that helps everyone stay aligned in spite of the changes of direction that can happen, or in spite of the time difference.
Yeah, I love it.
I like that idea of what's coming up. Touching back on the organizational location of marketing operations, you said it sits within a kind of a central team with other central functions. That's quite interesting. I get a bit prickly if I hear that marketing operations is not in marketing. It sounds like it works pretty well for you. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Of course. So I've been in that model for a few years now. So we had a similar setup in my previous company at Veeam. And effectively, what we've come to realize is individuals find that very beneficial. And I can speak from my experience as well. I do remember when I was, for instance, at Citrix, and I was marketing ops reporting to, the VP of channel and marketing. And in terms of career pathing, if you want to go up at some point, well, it's a bit limited unless you want to be the CMO. Right. But at the same time, if you want to try something else and don't have that exposure within the organization, it's a little more challenging. Right. And that's one of the benefits of having this centralized organization, is people have a lot more visibility on what other teams are doing, just from a personal exposure perspective. But then also in terms of collaboration, it's really, we have a lot more visibility on what is sales ops working on, what is enablement working on. Oh, you forgot this thing that marketing should know as well. And so we have touch points within this strategy and ops organization, and we have the touch points with marketing, who are our primary stakeholders. And we've seen some movements within the team between sales ops and marketing ops, or marketing ops and SDR ops. And so the transfers are happening with
these two teams. You've got services that I would assume would sit in MOPs traditionally in my world, although we are here writing definitions of what marketing operations is. How do you coordinate insight delivery with the BI team at Sneap?
That's a really good question. So the BI team is also part of that global centralized function. And the lines are sometimes a bit blurry, but big picture, the way we work with that team is they own more the infrastructure, building the capabilities at the back end. So for instance, the data lake, the data warehouse management, and then managing Looker, which is our BI platform, validating that everyone is using the right dimensions and the right properties, and like the seal of approval on new corporate dashboards. But then we on the ops side, and the same goes for SDR ops or the sales ops team, is we take then that infrastructure to build more operational dashboards, but also drive the exploratory analytics, the insights, and the cadence around, okay, let's look at the results for last week. What happened? What do we need to change? What are the campaigns that worked? And so really driving that conversation with the business sits with marketing operations when we are talking about marketing.
That makes sense. And knowing that you're sitting in part of that together in that operational group, that makes a lot of sense.
That's super interesting, that centralization. I'm really passionate about centralization, so I could talk quite a lot about it, but not only do you then get to sit closely with that, but you also see all the information for the entire group, for all of the
that's right,
for all the localized areas as well. So it must be very knowledgeable for you as well.
It's extremely, exactly to your point. It's very interesting because we get the business perspective really from a marketing subject matter expertise and that angle. But then we have a broader perspective of what's happening in the business in general. And that's actually something when one of the new team members mentioned recently, he coming from the digital world, and it was like, oh, it's the first time I see the end-to-end funnel, and I understand, where we're coming from, where we're going, the impact on pipeline, and really understanding downstream impact on the business, which is quite interesting. And having that perspective also informs some of the decisions, or at least put things in perspective. And when we do the annual planning, we have a really integrated process between 3-5 year planning type of exercise. So the big numbers, let's put it this way. And then the top-down exercise and progressing slowly through the funnel all the way down to the marketing numbers. Then we do the bottom-up exercise with marketing. And my colleague and I were really proud when we finalized the planning exercise last year, because the top down and the bottom up actually matched. It's the first time I see that. We're like, oh,
when does that ever happen?
We're speaking the same language. This is amazing, So having that level of integration and collaboration is extremely helpful.
So we're running out of time. One question I really did want to ask very quickly is, you touched on it. You've migrated, I think, from HubSpot to Marketo. Just interested in what drove that decision and what the experience was like.
So what drove the decision was primarily a number of requirements we had where HubSpot would not allow for the level of customization that we had when it came to scoring, to nurtures, to also the organization of the campaigns in the system. I think HubSpot is great as a marketing automation platform, and particularly where we were as a smaller organization. But seeing the level of complexity we were going towards, we're like, okay, we're going to need something a bit more robust from that perspective. It does come as a cost. The flexibility means the level of setup in the upfront work to make sure that everything is done right is of course higher. The enablement for the teams is of course higher. And again, where we have this champion model with people going into Marketo, not everyone is going to be a champion. Marketo is a little bit more difficult to manage from that perspective. The one thing though is just like for real estate, it's location. Mm-hmm. For the map, it's process. And no one will fix a process issue with a different tool, particularly when it comes to switching, for instance, from HubSpot to Marketo. And nailing that first is extremely important, which we had already established most of those processes before the switch. So we could grow into more like, how do we support that with the tool versus trying to plug a tool and then figuring out how to use it. So I think that was critical to the success of the implementation.
Right, Helene, I'm really sorry, but we've run out of time and I didn't even see that sneak up on us. It happened so quickly. A couple of points I just wanted to shout back at you was like process. Big thumbs up from me. I can see a TV program in everything that we can create out of that. So maybe we should connect at the time. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I hope your journey continues onwards and upwards. Yeah, thank you very much once again.
And thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks, Helene.
Bye-bye. Well, thanks very much once again to Helene for all her insight and knowledge about centralization, the superwoman that she is in marketing operations. If you want to contact Helene about any of the points she raised, you can do so on LinkedIn. That's Helene Horniker. And now it's time for us to move on to the rest of the show. Anyone fancy coffee?
And it's time now to catch up with our favorite marketing operations guru, Courtney Makara, as we get together for a virtual coffee with Courtney. Good morning, Courtney. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing lovely, thank you.
Great. And are you looking forward to camp?
I am so looking forward to camp. Yes, in early July in Seattle, it'll be beautiful weather, and we're going to be at the same venue that we were at last year, the Cedarbrook Lodge. Are you guys going to be hopping over and joining us?
Well, that would be lovely. Unfortunately, I think Karla's on vacation, actual vacation, and I'm not sure I can squeeze it in. But you never know. Maybe I'll make a last-minute appearance.
When are you going to do a European camp, Courtney?
Oh, well, we should talk about that. We will talk to the powers that be behind camp, which actually they just recently launched or relaunched a new website under a new domain.
Well, so let's back up for either new listeners or those that don't quite remember what we're talking about.
They don't know what happens at camp.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about it. You went last year, so what's it all about?
Yeah, so last year I attended a marketing ops summer camp in Seattle. It was like 3 days of sessions of chatting with about 30 other marketing ops professionals. But it wasn't a pitch presentation. It wasn't a bunch of vendors coming in and say, buy this technology and this integrates with your system. It was sitting around and talking about how do we do our jobs better? How do we either get promoted or get more budget or make our stakeholders happier? And it was such a wonderful, really fulfilling, rewarding experience that I have been itching to see if they're going to do it again, and if they're going to do it again in Seattle, because it's my hometown and very convenient for me geographically. And they are. So this July 11, 12, and 13th, we will be back at summer camp. And if you're interested, check out marketingops.com. It is featured right on the homepage. And we are limiting it to only 50 people, again, because I think that was one of our big takeaways, is that we liked that it was small.
Exclusive.
But not to be like exclusionary, but because it was so small, by the end of even the first day, I think every single person in the room had contributed, had spoke up. It wasn't this giant keynote speaker with 3,000 people where everyone feels like you just want to be anonymous. Like we all shared something about our daily lives and our roles and MOPs. And so we want to keep it small and kind of intimate and making it a little bit more comfortable to
No, it sounds great. I was jealous of you last time, and I'm envious again. And funnily enough, I was at an event, just a one day quite corporate thing, in a regular hotel conference room and all the rest of it just yesterday. But and I was kind of a guest really, but it is that thing of a fairly small group, and they did breakouts and round tables and discussions and so on, and they made the facilitators made sure to get input from everybody, and there's absolutely a lot to be said for that, to get participation and different perspectives, and even help people out with the issues that they're facing. So it all sounds good. And
I think my new pet peeve that I didn't even realize I have is when I go to a conference and I want to go to see a breakout session or something, and everyone wants to sit on the seat on the aisle.
Right.
So the first people that get there, they get the chair on the aisle.
Right,
So you have to like climb over them, and
Yeah.
and you've got your bag and your laptop.
You're
and it's
coughing COVID in their face. Yeah, all of
Yeah.
that.
Whereas camp is, I imagine you're all just sitting cross-legged in a little opening in the woods somewhere.
Playing guitars and singing Kumbaya.
I'm just gonna let you keep that visual in your mind.
Right,
Yes.
right.
We did have
Marshmallows and
s'mores.
fires. I've got it. I've got a vision, and I'm really gutted I can't be there actually, because it feels like, and I do agree with the intimacy or the exclusivity of it.
Yeah.
I feel like you'll actually talk about real subjects. You'll actually help the people that are there, and things will get actioned rather than you all sitting listening to something.
Well, I think what we need to do next year or next time is a live podcast from camp.
Ooh, from
Nice.
camp. I like it. I like it.
I'm packing my bag right now.
Fabulous.
I like it. And then I also like the idea of having, camp in other parts of the world.
Right.
I know last year they did one in Atlanta, Georgia, as well as Seattle.
Okay.
So I'll talk to the leaders. Mike Rizzo is kind of leading the helm for marketingops.com and their events. We can see if we can get an international camp.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Sponsored by MOPs.
So anyway, what else are you seeing happening, Courtney?
So this week I can't ignore what has been going on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, there's lots going on there these days. I feel like it has really changed as a platform in probably the last 12 to 18 months.
Right.
But now, early June, I feel like there's so many layoffs happening. And I feel like I can't log in without seeing someone who's either had a job offer rescinded or, has been part of a big layoff at their company. And I think, my heart goes out to people. I definitely want to volunteer if I can help in any way, even if it's just a pep talk or a resume review. But I'm curious if you guys are feeling the same kind of purse tightening strings happening over in the UK.
Do you know what? It's a great topic, great conversation to have, particularly as we only spoke about this on a couple of episodes ago, the sort of great resignation where there were more jobs. And I did read somewhere there are now more jobs available than there are people out of work in the UK. However, what's intriguing about this, Courtney, is what happens where you are tends to start what happens where we are. So maybe this is something we need to take heed of. What about you, Simon? Have you read anything or seen anything?
Certainly, I don't think, as you say, really the effect has washed up on our shores quite yet. And it could just be the differences between the tech sectors. In the UK, hiring talent and attaining tech talent is pretty tough anyway. But in fact, there was a piece in the Financial Times just a few days ago on this exact topic. And Courtney, you mentioned before we came on, there's a website called Layoffs.FYI that tracks a lot of this stuff. And the FT piece made reference to that. And, the kind of general sense from this was that there are lots of job cuts, and the big tech brands in particular are pulling back, and horror stories almost of people that have quit their jobs from one place to go somewhere else, and then to be told don't bother turning up, which is pretty devastating. But the kind of the sense from this was that it's almost just a bit of a reset. In the big tech brands in particular have just gone all out hiring and growing and what have you, and then have suddenly realized, oh wait, perhaps the economy is softening, perhaps there isn't the growth or the revenue to support this, and so scaling back. All being well, it's actually an opportunity for the lesser brands and the smaller companies to pick up the talent, and actually develop some products that possibly even have some genuine utility, and get people to do that. So it might not be.
There could be loads of reasons as well, couldn't there? I mean, and Courtney, you might hear it before us because you're seeing this before us, but it could be a bounce back from what happened. COVID bounced back, loads of redundancies, then shed loads of employment. It could be a bounce back from the Great Resignation, where people were taking more money for roles that maybe were, hiked salaries to try and get people in, and then that for the fallout of that, which was going to happen, is happening. I just don't know, but it is a bit concerning.
It is, and I definitely don't feel nearly educated enough to speculate on the cause of it, the state of global economic woes and how things are going. But it makes me think, well, what can we do, or how can we support each other? If you are in a current FTE role, does that mean you have to stay put? Don't jump ship now because you don't know where you're going. And I don't think that's quite a safe blanket statement. I just think it's just good for us to all be aware, because I'd hate to have the rug pulled out from anyone.
Yeah. Well, look, it dovetails into a subject that I wanted to mention, which was around, like, we're heavily steamboating into recession here in the UK, and I'm sure that there's problems globally, but it's where marketing operations kind of need to step up and really play their part. We're talking to clients these days, not so much about revenue and how we make more money, but efficiencies and how we add that money back to the bottom line, which might be repurposed to make more revenue. And I think that's the square place that marketing operations can play. So there is some opportunity to say, let's come on, superheroes, let's get efficient processes and save some money.
Yeah, and I think making sure you're not just being identified again as like the team that does the emails, or they just send out things from Marketo or HubSpot or whatever. Like, marketing ops can be so much more than that, and it can be really scary and intimidating if you are in a MOPs role to kind of step up to some VP and say, hey, we have access to this data, or we can see this about either our prospects or our customers, whether if it's churn or number of MQLs coming in, or sentiment or intent data. We do have access to that, and we really do need to step across the lines and collaborate with the other teams and stakeholders. I mean, I mentioned, I think, cross team collaboration before in regards to like PLG, the product led growth initiative, but I mean, it really is every single part of the business. Marketing ops can step up and help, and as more as you get educated on what the CS team is doing, or what maybe the accounting and financial teams are doing, we have so much data at our fingertips, and really can be helpful.
Yeah, it's a classic example of where MOPs need to be proactive and step up, as you say, and look for opportunities. And in this case, maybe it's cost savings and efficiencies, or maybe it's something to drive revenue or some other aspect, but not to just sit back and wait to be told to cut something or not do something or make something more efficient, but to actually look for the ways to do that and suggest them, and certainly do that on a collaborative, cross-functional basis wherever the opportunity arises. Well, on that note, which, all being well, is a positive one, and with best wishes to anybody who's been affected. As Courtney says, if there's anything that any of us can do, then you know where to find us. Courtney, thanks very much. Good to talk as always. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Well, best wishes to Courtney for camp. We look forward to hearing about it. And should you have been affected by layoff, Courtney would love to help if she can. Reach out via LinkedIn or at mustangmartech.com. Links in the show notes. And that's our podcast. Karla, what's MOPs got to do with it?
So I've learned one very important lesson this episode, Simon, and that is to ensure that you get the name of your guest's company right. So apologies to Helene and apologies to Sneak, who I mispronounced, and Helene quite rightly put me right. But other things I've learned, right? So Steffen, our marketing leader, brought us some really, really interesting knowledge around. The one thing I've written down that I did take from it that I thought was incredible, what he said, was around the more money you want, the more you have to prove it. And we've talked all the time about how to get more funding or into the marketing operations, to get more people, to build but actually, if you genuinely really want to do this, then you've got to prove it. So I wrote a little note about that. There was some great conversation around diminishing returns. And then there was another conversation around data. And there was a great plant a tree analogy in there that you reminded me of, which was plant a tree. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But quite rightly, if you haven't got any data in place, or you haven't got any process in place, the best time to do it's right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you haven't planted your data tree yet, or your reporting tree, or your analysis tree, don't worry, get on it.
Plant that tree.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, and then our second guest, Helene from Sneak, said correctly. So they've been through such a big change as a business. And in fact, I'm written down into my notes that it was a massive quick growth, but the comment that came from her was that it feels like a different company every quarter. And when you actually sit and reflect on that, I can imagine that the way that technology is growing and changing at the minute, that a few of us might feel that way. We might feel a bit like it feels like a different company, different technologies, different processes, different faces. As we need more specialists and people around us. So I think that's quite familiar in the industry, but yes, they grew massively. The other things that I wrote down was around centralized services, close to my heart. I can talk about centralization all day long. Helene and her team are a centralized service, a centralized marketing operations service, and that's possibly not the only, but one of the very few marketing operations centralized services. Centralization is a hot topic in the marketing industry right now. So it's quite nice to see that that marketing operations are pushing into that space as well. So some new content, I think. We're trying to see what's different between the businesses, and there's definitely some messages in our guests that I haven't heard in other guests that we've had in the podcast so far. So yeah, really enjoyable. Courtney, and then there's Courtney. So Courtney, talking about camp, blimey, getting ready for camp. I can imagine her packing her bag right now.
I can't believe it's come around again already.
I only felt like we talked about it a couple of months ago when she was there, and we were saying how jealous we were and that we would book on next year.
I know.
It's here. We haven't booked on. Sorry, Courtney.
No.
But yeah, I'd say tune into the next episode where 100% we'll be talking about what happened at camp. Although I hope they don't have a what goes on at camp stays at camp clause, otherwise we're in trouble. And then the other important subject we were talking about was layoffs, and it hasn't quite hit us here in the UK yet, but it's definitely some data that Courtney's shared with us, and the layoffs FYI site is a real eye-opener that I'm going to spend a bit of time having a look at. And I think our marketing operations friends just need to reach out to each other and sling some arms around each other and see if there's a way as a community we can help each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the point from camp and marketingops.com is exactly that. The community's out there. Make use of it wherever you need to.
Definitely.
Okay, that's it. There is no more. Thanks again for listening to episode 11 of What's MOPs Got to Do With It. Thanks to our guests, Steffen Hedebrandt, Helene Hornecker, and of course, Courtney Makara. Check out whatsmops.com, where you can find show notes and also listen to all of our previous episodes. You can also get in touch with us via the website or LinkedIn. It's great to hear from you with feedback, comments, and suggestions for future episodes. Do check out and follow the new LinkedIn page for regular updates. Comment and rate us on your preferred podcast platform. It really helps spread the word. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to receive the next episode in your feed. Next time, we will be speaking to Robert Howells, Chief Operating Officer at Demand Studio, and Lucy Allegan, a Senior Marketing Automation Leader in the asset management industry. And as always, we'll grab a virtual coffee with Courtney. So goodbye from me, Simon Daniels.
And goodbye from me, Karla Wentworth.